Talk radio that talks with you, not at you. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. Casey Hedrickson.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. You're about half an hour away from open lines. This program triggered by Rocket Guns and Shoot to Thrill Range, located 7 blocks east of the courthouse on Lincoln in Goshen, Indiana. Rocket Guns and Shoot to Thrill are your Second Amendment headquarters. And we have every single week what we're going to start doing is we're going to start having our buddy Steve over at the Cheap Seats. Steve Willis is joining us right now. He's going to come in. He's going to talk Irish and Chicago Bears football, of course. 95.3 MNC is your official station for the Chicago Bears. So, Steve, we got the Irish against Virginia. This is going to be an interesting matchup.
It really will. And are you a believer in Malik Zaire after last week versus Texas?
Well, more so than before. But, again, the Texas secondary is not exactly what you would call world class.
Well, I got to tell you, I was a believer in the offensive line. I mean, you want to talk about
the offensive line,
guys,
I'm a believer in. Yeah, I'm with you.
Dude, those 5 guys are going to play on Sunday eventually, once they get out of school. 527 total yards allowed, or taken, I should say, and they only allowed 163. I mean, you want to talk about a flip-flop, just a complete mismatch versus Texas. And Malik Zaire, I mean, looked phenomenal. He made the throws that he needed to make. And he really showed that he could lead that offense, and that's what I was looking for in that game. And now we're on to Virginia. Now Virginia, they just got off of a big loss to UCLA. This is actually going to be their second straight top 15 team that they've got to play, and they get a little relief next week because they get to play William and Mary. But see, now once again, the Irish. They're in a really good spot here because this is their only road game in the first 4 games they have. They go home next week to play Georgia Tech, and then they got UMass. So they've got 4, I'm not going to say easy games, but a little softer games before they start hitting the teeth of their schedule where they've got to go to Clemson and then, of course, USC shortly thereafter. So this game is a big game for Notre Dame to kind of put a stamp on the first third of their season, and it's their opportunity. They win this, they have a real good opportunity to be 4-0 going into that Clemson game, which I think they really need.
All right, so what's the key to victory here with Virginia? Obviously, Virginia wants to prove themselves. They're not exactly a bad program, but again, like you pointed out, 2 top 15 opponents. UCLA is a tough team, and so they're coming in 0-1, but that doesn't necessarily mean a lot.
Well, I think UCLA has 3 keys to victory here. First of all, they need to slow the game down. They need to really do that just due to the fact that if you try and get in a horse race with this Notre Dame offense, you're not going to win. If it's a barn burner, Notre Dame's going to blow them right out of the stadium. They need to keep the threat of the play action on. And the reason why I say that is they have 2 big wide receivers, big, strong guys that can get separation. Andre Laverne and Kyle Dawkins. They're both big. They're both huge. They're both really strong. And if Matt Johns, the quarterback for UC or
Virginia,
if he wants to get a hold of either of these guys, he's really got to keep that threat of the run game. And once again, that's going to help keep Zaire off the field, which he's going to be able to pick apart their defense if he gets any extended drives. And the key players for Notre Dame, obviously, are going to be Will Fuller at wide receiver for Notre Dame. 2 touchdowns, 7 catches for 142 yards versus Texas. That is a huge game for him. And I really liked the way Notre Dame recovered after losing Folsom. I mean, you still have running backs in the stable. I can't believe I'm saying that because Notre Dame has gone through like 5,000 running backs in the last 2 years. But CJ Portis, I think I'm pronouncing that right. And what can you say about him? He came in, he stepped right in, 20 carries, 98 yards, looked great.
He did exactly what he was supposed to do when you have that offensive line. I mean, they're talking about one of the Notre Dame offensive line going top 5 if not number one overall, for crying out loud. I know it's early for that in the NFL draft, but, I mean, that's any back is going to look good behind those guys.
Yeah, left tackle Ronnie Stanley is actually you're talking about. He could be a top 5 NFL draft pick. And then let's not forget about Nick Martin, center Nick Martin. His brother Zach Martin was drafted by the Cowboys last year, first pick in the for the Cowboys in their draft. So, I mean, both of those guys are very good shots at playing on Sunday and being an early pick in the draft. But these two teams are going to go completely different styles. Notre Dame is going to really try and run down the field. They're going to try and go over the top. They're going to kind of settle back a lot of the passing game. I think you're going to see a lot of that read option in this game. But most of it is just going to be to give Zaire that much more of a chance to look downfield and to kind of slow down a little bit of that Virginia defense, because their defense is actually very fast.
So are we looking at, is Fuller, did he have just kind of a fluke game, or is Fuller going to be the guy this time? Because they really haven't had a guy break out since Michael Floyd left.
I really think, I mean, he's not the biggest, and he's not he's only like 6 foot and 180 pounds. So we're not talking about the biggest, strongest, fastest guy. And personally, I think there are 2 better wide receivers on the roster, but he seems to have that connection with Zaire. He just seems to be able to, with a wide receiver and a quarterback, there seems to be that get-it factor. Certain wide receivers just seem to pair up. Chris Carter in the NFL was like that. He wasn't the fastest guy on his team. He wasn't the best route runner, but he always seemed to be right where he needed to be to catch the big catch. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Fuller.
And it looks like the Irish are at least 11.5-point favorites in this game. So what about the Chicago Bears? We're the official station for the Chicago Bears. We are coming into opening week of the NFL and a whole new season. And, when you're looking at the Chicago Bears, they have some question marks at receiver, but they're also playing the Packers, who have been decimated at receiver. So what's your take on this one?
Yeah, it really looks like it's going to be a whole lot of trial and error with both teams at wide receiver. First of all, new look for the Bears defense. They're running a 3-4 defense this year. Is a little bit different from what you're used to seeing. That's going to put a little more pressure, I think, on Jaron Allen, Will Sutton, and Ego Ferguson, who are going to be their down linemen. They're really going to they're going to need a lot more pressure on Aaron Rodgers, and I say that or with a little bit of caution, because by a lot more pressure, any pressure at all.
Yeah, no kidding.
They just can't get to him. He gassed them for 10 touchdowns last year in their 2 games. And obviously the last one in November, where the Packers won 55-14, Aaron Rodgers threw for 6 touchdowns, 4 of which went to Jordy Nelson.
Of course, a big difference in that Jordy Nelson's not in this game, and the Bears don't have the worst defensive coordinator in the history of football anymore. So there's that.
That is correct. That is correct. That is correct. And actually, I think another big help, McPhee, Acho, Ball, Antrell Roll, they've all been picked up in the offseason. That is a big help to the Bears' passing defense. So I think that's going to really kind of stem that tide a little bit. I think for the Packers, though, Devontae Adams, that's going to be the name to watch to kind of step in here. He had an excellent rookie year. This will be his chance to kind of shine with no Jordy Nelson, and Aaron Rodgers is going to need another target to go to. Obviously, the Bears with no Brandon Marshall this year, they're going to really look to Alshon Jeffrey, I think, and then possibly if they can get Kevin White back later on in the year, he might end up being a factor. That stress factor, though, I don't know if they're going to be able to get him back in time. But Alshon Jeffrey, I think, at the wide receiver spot's really going to carry the load. The running games, obviously, we know what we're going to expect out of both. And as far as that defense, I'm excited to see what the Bears do with the 3-4 defense. I think it's a better fit for Jared Allen. When he played in Kansas City, he was in a 3-4 defense under Gunther Cunningham, and he really shined in that defense. It was actually one of the things that got him his big contract in Minnesota when he left Kansas City.
Sure is going to be weird to see the Bears running a 3-4. By the way, Chicago Bears are saying that Alshon Jeffrey, Eddie Royal, and Marquise Wilson, they're hopeful that they will be available for the game. So It looks like they're hopeful that they're going to get their big three wide receivers out there. I expect Eddie Royal to have a better first couple of games because Alshon Jeffrey is notoriously horrible at catching the football week 1 through 3. Sam Acho is out. Tracy Porter is also out. Bostic is questionable.
Right. There's been so many dings and so many injuries in the NFL in the preseason this year that it's almost going to look like one more preseason game this first week of the season. And the Bears really want to get that. They need to get this one. I think they do, just for the simple fact that they got to kind of put a little kink in this streak. If the Packers beat Chicago in Sunday's game, that's going to be 9 out of the last 10 meetings. So Chicago's got to do something, just kind of help rebuild. I do think it's the Packers' division to lose still, even with that loss, Jordy Nelson. But I see Chicago starting to make a little noise. Tom Fox is going to bring a new energy in there, and we'll see what happens week 1, but I think they're going to look good. I do have the Packers winning 28-17 in that. I also have the Irish winning 31-10 in Saturday's game.
All right, sounds good. So, Steve, how did they get a hold of you, man?
Well, of course, I'm on Twitter. I didn't mention my Twitter handle. That's TCS Willis, Tango Charlie Sierra Willis. At Cheap Seats Willis on Instagram and Facebook. Just search Cheap Seats with Steve on Facebook. You'll find it.
All right, man. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week, bud.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Steve Willis from the Cheap Seats. Also want to remind everybody the Chicago Bears season kicks off Sunday when the Monsters of the Midway take on the Green Bay Packers on 95.3 MNC Bears Radio, presented by First Response Disaster Restoration Specialists.